Alright, so good afternoon class. So for today, ilan pa lang kayo pumapasok? Let's check. Okay, so thank you for joining our Zoom meeting. Anyway, by and by, I'm going to publish this as Module 5 for the others to see our main agenda for today. So for our Module 5, we're talking about portrait and landscape photography. Okay, if we're talking about portrait landscape photography, we were able to understand more and challenge ourselves how to do this type of photography, especially in portrait. You're taking pictures in vertical mode, portrait pictures, or a portrait human being or animals or any object by means of portrait. And then if we were talking about landscape, we're talking about the landscape itself. It's horizontal as well as most common landscapes. We have the landscape photography, nature. So landscape photos, and then. But technically speaking, if you're talking about portrait landscape, portrait is vertical, landscape is horizontal. Ganun lang yung pag-take. Kumbaga, you're taking a picture with this manner, landscape photography, portrait photography. So, ganun lang. Okay, so before we proceed, uh, let's try to scan our learning outcomes for this module. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to do the following. Appreciate the beauty of portrait and landscape photography. Next, we also have apply the rule of thirds in your photography compositions. And last, we have compose your portrait and landscape photography using your available cameras. So naka-ready na ba yung mga camera nyo dyan, guys? Your gadgets, your cell phone camera, as well as your DSLR or mirrorless camera kung meron man. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, I have here a sample of a one concept photo. What would you prefer to shoot? Portrait or landscape? Why? Explain your answer in 2 to 3 sentences only, 10 points. Below is a sample of a portrait versus landscape. It is the same photo, but the cropping is different, which is portrait. As you can see on this side, it's portrait. And as you can see on this side, the landscape. So which? Let me know your ideas. Okay? Next, let's proceed. So learning regarding portrait as well as landscape. So let's start. 8 portrait photography tips every photographer should know. First, pick the perfect background for your subject. Guys, always remember, wag nagpipicture kayo, if you're taking pictures, consider your background. Baka there will be a photo bomber on your, for example, yung sa akin, di ba, ito, naka-landscape. Biglang may umaligid dito na parang tao na lumalabas. O ganyan. Or any object or anything that will distract your photo. So take note, as much possible, if you take photos, it's clean, avoid editing, kasi pag talagang, mas maganda pag pure, raw shot, much better. So ganyan. Pick the best or perfect background. So we have plain, as you can see, plain background. We also have here, however, you don't have to choose a complete plain background, for instance, but interesting wall, fence, or any call this interesting background like the nature, pwede din yon. You go on top of the mountain, yun, mga halaman, mga trees, yun ang mga background. Those are actual backgrounds. So no type of editing. So of course, it will depend as you as a photographer on how you're going to angle. So kayo, as long as you're creating your portrait for humans, you can let them move. Pwede silang gumalaw. You can teach them. While for landscape, ito lang ang problema. For the landscape, it's already there. You cannot move the mountain. It's you, the photographer, who will call this move and find your perfect spot. So that's the difference. Unlike with portraits, models, you can let them move, you can guide them. Of course, you try to consider, of course, your weathers. Depende rin yan sa panahon pag sa landscape. Next, let's proceed. Another technique we have here is an object that provide added interest or context. For example, an artist in front of the easel, or fisherman in front of the boat, as well as the musician in front of her guitar. Or for example, here we have a portrait, close tight portrait, tapos may konting background. It's kind of shallow because of the aperture. As much possible, this is 2.8 or 1.4. Kaya ganyan yan. Oops, wait. Oops, 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 oops. Wait. What's that? May pumapasok. Wait lang. Set lang natin sila. Okay, so as you can see here, meron siyang shallow. Depth of field is very obvious. Background is blurred while the subject is very clear. Ha? Ano yun? Any question or reaction? Okay, let's proceed. Next, of course, here, number 2. Tip number 2. Prepare your portrait subjects for the shoot. As you go with your plan to create your portraits, make it sure that you are really prepared. Okay? Hindi yung susugod kayo ng walang bala. As much possible, you prepare all your gears, all your lights, all necessary gadgets or props that you're going to use for your plan portrait shoot. If your plan is for debut, kailangan meron mga kwan dyan, pang debut na background, mga propellers dyan, kung ano man yan, anything that will help or suffice your picture. So making sure that you are really prepared for your portrait shoot during the shoot. Kasi baka mamaya, naghahabol kayo. Especially, making sure you are prepared for the sunset. Sunset shoot kayo with the portrait sunset shoot. Wala na, lumubog na yung sun. Tapos na, hindi ka prepared kasi wala yung lights. You forgot the speed light as well as the flashlight or the call this mga different lights, studio lights na mga portable studio lights. You forgot those to set up. So meaning, make it sure that you're really prepared with all your gears and plan. Okay? Next. As you can see here also, you need to communicate with your models. Kailangan kinakausap nyo rin sila so that you can able to call this, to let them understand ano kayong magandang pose, pictures, ganyan. That goes with your number 3, which is pose your portrait subject like a pro. So as a photographer, dapat model ka din. You need to demonstrate to them. Up, konting shoulder. Chin up, konti. Ganyan. Chin down. Masyadong kita. Up, to the left, to the right. So ganon. You should know how to direct. Kung baga director ka. Ganon yun. In terms of a portrait photographer or for those who are well-known photographers here in the Philippines, kailangan marunong ka mag-direct as long as you're going a portrait shoot. So ganun din. Pose your portrait subject like a pro. So pwedeng ganyan. Tight shot. We have bird's eye view sa taas yung angle. And then we also have here a portrait na very obvious portrait tack with your subject, with the emotions. Kailangan kausap mo yung kausap nyo, yung models, as well as your how you crop them. Then as much possible, avoid cropping the head. No, baka mamaya ganyan na crop. Wala na yung mata or wala na yung noo. So as much possible, be careful of cropping. Okay? Then as much possible, you do it more wider so that on the post-processing, pag nakita nyo, pwede kayo mag-crop closer. Kasi kapag closer na yung kanyo, then suddenly nagkamali kayo ng cropping, ayun lang. Next, so we have here, as you can see, keep in mind that shooting in the sun does not require you to provide fill in, meaning fill in the lights, meaning we're talking about proper exposure. As you can see with the photo, the light is very ambient light, is very bright, and it's not overexposed. It is equally and it looks like a perfect exposure. Why? Because kita lahat ng details, the hair, the eyes. So as you can see with the background, it's very shallow, super blurred. So that would be 2.8 to 1.4 aperture. So mga ganyan. And then tight cropping, very good. So dito yung tama yung pag-crop niya. Then as much possible, avoid cropping from the elbow, exactly from the elbow, ganyan. So there are many ways on how to crop the image in terms of portrait photography, their style. So hindi basta-basta kung saan mo lang gusto i-crop, doon may ka-crop. Make it sure to crop it properly for a better output. Next, of course, you have to catch the emotion. While you're talking with your model, kausapin mo, catch! Ayan, kita mo, smiley eyes. Kita nyo naman yung mata niya. Talagang ngiting-ngiti, oh. And of course, very obvious, with yung ngiti niya sa lips as well as ngipin, kitang-kita talagang super joy. So as much as possible, catch the moment. That's the most important thing. Kasi bihira lang magkaroon ng ganyan. So try to communicate. Proper rapport lang yan. Next, use a flattering focal length. If we're talking about use of flattering focal length, as much as possible, you should use a prime lens. Pag sinabing prime lens, those lenses are without zooms. Kumbaga, it is already fixed. Like 50 mm, 85 mm, 300 mm. Those are prime lens na hindi siya na i-zoom. Meaning, automatic siya, the only thing that you're going to adjust is your aperture. It depends on, pag 1.4, super blurred. Pag f8 or f16, super clear. Depende sa background na gusto mo. And then, it depends on the light. So, as you can see here, 50 mm focal length give you the most accurate representation of your subject because it creates no distortion. Yes, correct. Kasi nga, yung 50 mm, it's very good for portrait talaga. That's lens is designated for portrait. Wala siyang distortion. Unlike if you're going to use an ultra-wide lens, nag-picture ka ng portrait with your ultra-wide lens, sometimes your body kumakapal or yung paa mo humahaba. That's the problem in terms of using incorrect lens of a certain subject. So usually, kung gusto mo tumangkad, cheating ang tawag doon, yung sa lens na yon, yung ultra-wide lens. Kaya niya magpatangkad, kaya niya magpataba. But if you're going to use a prime lens, steady, without zooming, yun, mas okay yun. Meaning, hindi siya distorted, hindi siya nagiging ganun yung mukha nyo, nagiging ganun, o na ganyan. So that goes with your, parang ganito, super tight. So parang pag titignan mo, parang siyang oblong. And then after tight, and then kulang sa proper cropping. So as much if you should shoot a focal length of 50 mm, you should start see some undesirable distortion of your facial features. Of course, yun nga, sinasabi, as much as possible, you talk with your model. Kasi hindi basta nag-take ka ng picture, yun na yun. To tell you honestly, with my more than 100 photos, sa isang angle lang yun, 100 photos, isa lang ang ina-upload ko. So, ganun yun. So, very crucial. Hanapin mo, you're going to search which of the following is the best emotion, expression of your model. Okay? Next, let's proceed. So, ito medyo kwan siya. Fierce yung kanyang pagtingin dito. Fierce. Fiercey. Ayan. Para siyang kala mo. Lalaban ka pa ba? Okay, next. Let's proceed. Number 6. Blur the background using your aperture priority. Yun nga, sabi ko sa inyo guys, if you use a 1.4 aperture, for sure, your background is very blurred while your subject is very clear. So that's the power. Ito yun, as you can see, super blur yung background. As in parang wala ka nang, hindi mo na, you cannot even distinguish what part of this background, anong klaseng background to. So it's a light. Same with this. Clear subject. The background is very shallow. Same with this. Ito medyo halatado mo na konti yung background mo dito is kind of bushes or pwedeng halaman or grass or any part of the plants na nagganyan na nagburst siya. So it's a nice effect especially pag shallow. Yan ang pinakamaganda sa mga ng mga nagpo-portrait photography. Next, number 7, expose for the subject's face. Siyempre, because it's a portrait, as much possible, i-focus yung mukha niya. Hindi pwede yung ilong niya, o kaya yung tenga niya, o yung noo niya. Make it sure, meron kayong facial portrait output. So, ganun lang yon. So, as you can see here, we have here. Then, of course, take note of the eye. The eye is one of the most important thing to remember in taking pictures in terms of portrait. Kailangan malinaw yung mata. Kasi sometimes, mamaya, if 1.4 or 1.0 ang gamit mo, it's very crucial. Konting galaw lang nung focus point niya. Sometimes the focus is on the ear. Blurred na yung eyes. There are cases, o lalo na yung ilong. The nose is very clear, but the eyes is blurred. So take note, in taking portraits or human portraits, take note of the eye. Should be very clear. Doon kayo mag-focus sa eye niya. Suppose the eye gives you the emotion as well as the whole output of your portrait. So yan, pwede rin. Titig sa mata. Then we also have this one. Focus on the eye, number 8. Kaya sabi ko lang, look at the expression of the eye. Smiley eye siya. Oh. Smiley eye ang tawag dito. Meaning, napapangiti yung eye. Meaning, contented, satisfied. Yan. Same with this. Tingnan nyo, yung eye niya is focused, the other eye is unfocused. Yun yung sinasabi ko, guys. Because of the focal length as well as the focal length aperture. Because if your aperture is 1 point something yan, talagang konting distance lang is naglo-blurred. Just like this, clear, blurred yung isang mata. So that's it. And of course, catchy yung mata niya. And then, of course, so in short, if you're taking pictures, portrait, as much possible, consider the rule of thirds. Pasok natin yung rule of thirds, guys. Can you see the rule of thirds here? Kita nyo ba? Okay, let me, naglo-loading siya konti. And here we go. Wait lang natin saglit. Almost there. Wala pa lumalabas sa screen ko. May lumalabas ba sa screen nyo? Wait, bakit nga eh? There you go, nag-white na siya. Oh, only it. Okay, can you see the picture? We have, looks like a serenity. Nakikita nyo guys, violet. Guys? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
yan,
sir.
mag-react kayo. Baka mamaya wala pa akong kausap dito. Okay, the rule of thirds guys, ito sabi niya, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. As much as possible guys, avoid putting your main subject, just like for example here, rule of thirds, nasa pangatlo siya. It's between the third, it's between the second and third spaces. So nandito siya. Yan na natawag na rule of thirds. Same with here. 1, 2, 3. Nandito. So meaning the focus of your subject is here. Rule of thirds. Hindi siya ganito. Wait lang. Send natin sa mahiwagan natin. Wait. Bakit nagahang? Okay. Pwede rin naman yung cropping style niya. Pwede rin ganito. Or as much possible, you avoid like this. Okay, wait natin saglit. Here we go. There you go. Okay, for the cropping style, siguro, as much possible, avoid centralize. Kumbaga siya ang box nasa gitna. Center of attraction. Not unless you have, call this, it's your purpose is to focus on the center. But technically speaking, as much possible, whether this is portrait or landscape, if your subject is the focus of your composition, as much possible, apply rule of thirds. So, try mas avoid niyo yung mga ganito na cropping style, ganyan. And then, as much possible, huwag din yung ganyan, putol mo sobra. Sobra ng putol, di ba? So, as much possible, ganito. Tama lang yan, rule of thirds. Tama lang siya. Okay? Next. Okay. Same with this. Oops, wait. Ka-rule of thirds yung ating pusa or cat. Nasa third part of the photo. So, para nasa dito side na yan. Ganyan. Next. Ito na yung sinasabi ko sa inyo. Rule of thirds, portrait, cropping, eyes, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So, nasa third siya. The eyes is the focus. So, yan yung sample. As you can see, the background is very shallow. Nasa ilalim siya ng puno. And then we have here a very nice shallow background. super blurred. So napaka-effective niyan. So you try to apply that guys, rule of thirds, okay? Next, ito din. You can see human, nature, as well as animals. Well, ito, naka-rule of thirds pa rin siya. Alright. Next, same with this, island. Rocky Island, naka-rule of thirds. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, rule of thirds pa din siya. Pag sinabi rule of thirds, take note, it's not considered na parang nandito sa pinakadulo at the very tip. As much possible, konting adjustment lang. Huwag yung dito sa side na to, nandito lahat. Or nandun sa pinaka-side na to. Medyo huwag niyong side, ipunta niyo. Meaning, it's between the center and the side. It's between the center and side. So, ito yun. Okay, next. Portrait or prenup, ganyan. O, see, naka-rule of thirds pa din. Hindi mo siya crop. And then, as much possible, pag ganyan ng model mo or your focus, lang tayo dito sa editing. So, avoid doing like this. Or ganyan. Yan. Crop. You see? Putol yung paa. Sayang. Okay? Mali yung cropping mo. So as much possible, you maximize your frame, a very wide frame, saka kayo mag-crop. Okay? Not unless that is your focus. Pwede. Okay? So what else? What you can do? Pwede rin siya namang portrait. Gawin natin siyang portrait. So kapag ginawa natin portrait yan, ganyan siya. Then lagyan mo ng konting rule of thirds pa din. Ganyan. Okay. So that's it. Oh, see? Hindi siya nasa gitna, hindi rin siya nasa side, nasa kalagitnaan ng gitna at side. It's between and your focus is this. Rule of thirds. So, ganyan. It depends on your cropping style. Basta gandahan nyo lang guys. You try to conceptualize. Then of course, your balance of your camera dapat konti na. And then as much possible, avoid tilting. Pero kung kinakailangan, so be it. But not all the time. Okay? Next, let's proceed. So we're done with the portrait. Let's go with the landscape. 10 tips to help a landscape photographer. First, so as you can see here, landscape, we have sunrise, we have the hill, mountains, and then the reflection and the sunburst. Yung mga sun rays, sunburst, napaka-crucial, especially if your lens is very, very rare lens na it can create the flares. Ganyan, flare as well as the rays. So far, yung flare niya dito, hindi masyadong, pero yung exposure, overexposed from this part, but it's okay. It shows with the layer. So usually kapag mga kalahati ng sun or moon, nagre-ray talaga yan. Next, we have here a shallow. As much possible, this is more than 30 seconds. Kasi tingnan nyo yung tubig, oh. This is some body of water. Talagang super flat na siya. It's already moved. Nag-move na yan. And then of course, you can see the sky, the movement of the clouds. It's really, parang na siya nag-spread. And then that goes. We have here a sample of the bushes frame. Naging frame na siya. So pwede yon. And then your main subject, we have here your trees as well as the smoke effect of the fog. So ang galing ng framing niya, ang galing. So yun ang magiging challenge if you're going to take landscape photos. Ikaw yung mag-adjust as a photographer. Unlike with a portrait, you can teach them what to do para hindi kayo but for landscape, it's already there. Nandun na. Hindi na ikaw na lang ang mag-adjust. Okay, let's proceed. Tip number 1, composition. As you can see, very nice composition. Center of attraction is your model here. It takes more than 10 seconds picture of this. And then steady yung calm body of water. And then the burst of your sky as well as your clouds, talagang halatadong gumalaw siya. So as far as I know, this is more than 10 seconds to 30 seconds steady. And then the exposure is very ambient, napaka-natural. Next. So that goes with your composition. As much as possible, you compose a certain masterpiece, talagang i-compose yun ng maayos. Okay? Wag lang basta take ng picture ng picture. Wag lang basta selfie ng selfie. As much as possible, i-compose nyo. Iayos nyo. Okay? Next, we have here focal point. Your focal point here is, of course, we have the tower. Or ang tawag dito is lighthouse tower. Usually sa mga dagat, like yung mga famous dagat natin dito sa Philippines, like Batanes, ang daming ganito. Even with Bulinaw, even sa, saan pa ba yung mga meron to? Sa San Fernando, meron din ganito. And then, you compose, the same with composition, ang galing ng kanyang composition with this alignment, linear alignment, goes through. So, pupunta kayo dun sa lighthouse. Yung focus ng unang tingin ng picture, map, leading, yung lines niya, yung leading goes to the lighthouse. That's the center of attraction. And then what else? Of course, very obvious, during sunset or sunrise nangyari to because of the color of the sky and the clouds. Next, foreground. Guys, take note. Excuse me. In terms of the foreground, you don't just take pictures na usual, very plain yung foreground. Pag foreground, nasa harap. Just like what you see here, meron tayong foreground na flowers, yellow flowers. That will give you embellishment or more, call this additional, how do you call this, props, pwede, in front of your subject. So yun tayo, foreground. And then we have here, the midground, middle part of your photo. And then the last one, the sky, the mountains, those are the backgrounds. Okay? So we still have last 10 minutes. So let's proceed. Number 4. So take note of that. You put a foreground. Wag niyong baliwalain. You try to create a foreground. Kaya hanap nyo. Okay? Next, we have focusing the depth of field. If we're talking about again depth of field, in colors, in terms of the clarity and the depth of field of your photo, especially if you're taking pictures, in portraits, kailangan yung depth of field. But for landscape, usually nakikita mo yung depth of field dito sa part na yan on your background side. Meaning, konting shallow na siya dito. While for this part, very clear. That goes with your focusing and depth of field. Nakafocus tayo dito and your depth of field is for the sky. Next, rule of thirds. Oh, ito na yung sasabi ko kanina. Gitna. Wala siya sa gitna. So you're not going to crop this one side na to. Or nandyan yung crop. So as much possible, konting adjustment lang. So your foreground is plain. We have here the snow. Then your middle ground is with the, is this a church? And then your background is the mountain with the sky during sunset to. Okay? Okay, next. Histogram. Guys, pag nasabing histogram, sa camera kasi natin may natawag tayong histogram. Yung para siyang, it's not like the histogram graph. It's a graphing where it indicates your camera whether it is overexposed or underexposed. Like for example, dito. Ito yun guys. Shadows. Pag ganito, itong part na to, it goes here, it is so dark. Pag ito naman, napunta dito sa side na to, it's too overexposed. Kaya mas maganda kapag yung the top part or the tip part or the highest peak should be at the center. Meaning, equally distributed yung exposure. It's not underexposed, it's not overexposed. So that goes with your histogram. Kaya usually ito makikita rito, very nice composition. The body of water is very plain. For sure, it's more than 5 seconds para mag-steady yon. And then as you can see, the movement of the clouds. Kitang-kita. Next, taking picture during golden hour. Like golden hour, like we have, pag ngayong hapon, we have 3 o'clock hanggang sunset. Or you have your sunrise until 9 o'clock a.m. So, yun yung mga pinakamaganda. Those are the time. Kaya usually mga landscape photographers, they have their sunrise photography as well as sunset photography. Because ang ganda ng kulay. Especially if it affects colors. Kukulay talaga siya. Not unless very plain yung sky, wala na makikitang kulay. But if there's are billions of call this embellishment like the clouds or other stuff there or other background, pwede yon. So magkukulay siya. Kaya tatawag in terms of proper time. So kasi hindi kasi lahat, you can just take photos anytime kung kailan mo gusto. What if umuulan? O di wala. Foggy, wala kayo nakuha ng picture. So as easy as that. So golden hour, try to consider, is one of the best way how to take landscape photography. Next, gears. Sabi dito, when shooting landscape, a lot of you of time will be shooting in a golden hour in those times just before, after managing. So usually pag gears ang gamit dito, of course, try to consider your gadgets prepared as much possible. Same with portrait photography. Your gears should be properly prepared like your tripod. In every photographer, napaka-importante ng tripod and the tripod should be very sturdy para to avoid shaky photos or shaky composition. Especially if you're in a place na sobrang mahangin, kailangan mo ng sturdy na tripod. Yung hindi talaga gagalaw kahit sobrang lakas ng hangin. So as much possible, do that and prepare your gears. Leading lines, the same with the nakita kanina, it leads you to this called this city, island city. So we have here, from this part, go to the center, from this part, go to the center. So it leads you on the center part of the frame. So yan, very sa golden hour din to, sunset. And this is more on faster shutter speed kasi nakita niyo yung wave. Oh. Nakikita pa yung wave, meaning the line waves kita pa. So nasa more than kanya, nasa 60 to 120 yung speed niya over 1,000. Ganyan. So faster shutter speed naman to. Then of course, balance of your. And of course, syempre as a landscape photographer, hindi mawawala yung mga filters. Yung tulad ng sinabi ko during the first one introduction, I use a filter na ginagamit natin sa landscape natin. Just like this one, I'm using a GND. Itong GND, dark sa taas, light sa baba. Kumbaga, para siyang naka-shade yung sun while the foreground is light, walang shade. Unlike with this one, especially if I'm using okay, kita nyo ba? Ayan o, samples niyan. So ND filter, ang tawag dito is ND 1000, ND 1. So there are several ND filters that you're going to use para siyang shade, para hindi siya overexposed. And then the color should be balanced at lalabas yung totoong kulay niya. Next. Yan. Natural, we have the rainbow. Then that's it. So what this makes good photo, and here we go. So you just scan that, guys. Scan nyo lang yung ating tips with landscape as well as portrait photography. Then next, let's proceed. You just try to watch this portrait tips as well as landscape tips. And then you have the rule of thirds. And then analysis. What can you say regarding this type of photography taken by yours truly? So this picture was taken last March 13. March 13 is a new moon, walang moon. So we were blessed. Yan. Ito yung mga kasama ko, friends, yung mga kaibigan ko yan. And then I woke up around 3 a.m. and then pinakaramdaman ko muna. Then suddenly 4 a.m. okay na. Nag-clear na yung sky. Lumabas na yung galaxy. So ayan. So ginising ko sila as early as 4 a.m. just to take this picture with them. So ganyan. So the settings na ginamit ko is 30 seconds, f2 para lumabas yung star, and then ISO 6400. More ISO para lumabas yung kulay niya, and more noisy sa part na to. Noisy meaning ilalabas na yung kulay. Next. So let me know in 2 to 3 sentences what can you say about that photo. Next number, or we have here application. Using your camera or phone, take 2 photos or one portrait and one landscape of the same concept, just like with our prior knowledge. Yung tiger kanina, isang picture, laka landscape, and then you try to crop it with and compare. Then of course, explain your composition in just 1 to 2 sentences. Portrait is 10 points. Landscape is 10 points. Next, the last, we have Using your camera phones or DSLR, compose your portrait and landscape photography. Explain your work in not more than 14 sentences in each photos nito. Okay? So you can choose your model, human for portraits, and then landscape, nature for the landscape photography. So that is your main assignment for this module. So we still have 1 minute. Do you have questions, guys? Question? May question ba kayo? Do you have questions? Are you still there, guys? Parang wala na kayo.
Yes, sir.
May tanong?
None, sir.
None.
None, sir.
Anyway, you just ask me questions just in case may mga emergency questions kayo. So, have a nice day. Thank you for joining. Kahit konti lang kayo na pumasok. We are 9. So, thank you, thank you. And have a nice day.
Thank
Happy
you, sir.
Holy Week sa ating lahat. So, ingat-ingat tayo kung saan man kayo mapapadpad. Okay? So, thank you guys for joining our Zoom meeting.
Thank you,
Have a nice
sir.
day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye po.
Bye.
Ending in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.